Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed the first part of Heir Parent because that's where we're going to pick up again today. Where we last left off is Giannini received a gift certificate from her father to go play a virtual reality game at Rasmussen Gaming Center, and she just started diving into Heir Apparent where she found out that she is an heir to the king and she has been summoned to go back to court. All right, we are going to pick back up with Chapter 3, Fun and Games with the Family. When Deming and I arrived at the castle, there were pages to blow a trumpet fanfare, and guards who saluted and called me Highness, without the superior mockery of Deming's tone. In the courtyard, 2 squires rushed forward to help me dismount. Having never in the real world ridden anything livelier than a carousel horse, I'd been pleasantly surprised that my character had memories of riding a horse. Of course, that had been bareback on the plow horse the community of St. Jehan shared. But if I didn't try to analyze and I just let my character's instincts take over, it wasn't too hard to stay on. A good thing, because I suspected that if I'd fallen, Deming would have just left me, king's wishes or not. But now, servants lifted me off his horse as though I were a delicate lady, and both I and my character enjoyed that. Deming disappeared into the crowd, probably to take a bath if I was to take all of his sniffing and whining seriously. A gray-haired man in crushed velvet suit was waiting by the entrance to the castle proper. "Welcome, Princess Janine," he said, bowing. "I am Counselor Rawdon, one of King Sinric's advisors. Allow me to escort you to the great hall where the royal family awaits." Though his smile looked sincere, I kept in mind what Deming had said about the king's advisors, suggestions at my birth. I was half expecting that the people of Rasmussen would give me a castle that was a wreck, run down and rat-infested. But it was the one I had seen in the promo. It was like a magnificent old cathedral, except without the incense. Polished stone walls and floors, high vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows. Rawdon led me down a wide gallery. One wall was made of mirrors. The other was a series of marble arches, opening onto a formal garden with fountains and crushed stone walks. I tried not to gawk like a tourist. Finally, we came to a massive set of carved doors. 2 guards in ceremonial dress saluted, then opened the doors, while a third man blew yet another fanfare. "Her Royal Highness," Rodham proclaimed, "Princess Janine." My first impression was that I had just been announced to an empty room, but then I saw that everybody, and everybody was only 4 people, was clustered around 2 thrones way down at the other end. Rawdon whispered, "Good luck," my first hint that he was about to abandon me. I whipped around to see him bowing his way backward out between the doors. Once he cleared the opening, those 2 guards swung the door shut with a massive thud, leaving me with my back exposed to my 3 half-brothers would have been the obvious guess, and the woman I glimpsed, one of their wives, perhaps, or she could be the queen, my dead father's wife, and mother to his sons. I hadn't thought to ask Deming if she was still alive or what her name was, putting me at a definite social disadvantage. Obviously, I wasn't going to find out anything by standing with my back to them. The closed doors 5 inches from my nose. Someone tittered, and I had the impression it wasn't the woman. "Hello," I said, turning to face them. There was a huge leaded glass window behind them, so that they were little more than dark silhouettes. My footsteps echoed hollowly as I crossed the vast distance all alone, aware of the 4 sets of eyes watching me, evaluating. Should I have waited to be invited to approach? No, I thought. I'm a princess. Or at least half a princess. Princesses do not wait to be summoned. Do they? Close up, I determined the woman was definitely the queen. For one thing, she was sitting on one of the thrones. She had a crown. She was also 40 or 50 years old. A bit old for any of these guys. even for an arranged marriage. The princes ranged from one who was only a couple years older than me to the other two who were probably in their early to mid-30s, 20s. They were the good-looking guys I'd noticed in the coming attractions. "Hello," I said again, remembering to stand straight and trying not to fidget, which was tough, considering I didn't know if I was supposed to bow, seeing as how we were all royalty. "It's a great honor to—" The queen turned to the prince, who stood at her right. That one was Abbas, I thought. I suddenly understood what Deming had meant when he'd said Abbas was strong in the classical sense. He looked like he'd stepped out of one of those old Hercules movies. Huge muscles bulging out of an outfit consisting mostly of leather straps with metal studs. His skin was tan and slick. I wouldn't have looked that healthy with a whole tube of skin bronzer. "This girl," the queen said to Abbas, "smells like a goat." The prince wrinkled his nose. "Yes," he said in a strained voice that sounded as though he was trying not to inhale. "Ahem," I said, "a sheep, actually." The queen gave me a look like, oh, I didn't know turds could talk. "I've been working tending sheep." Don't get started, I warned myself. She didn't want explanations or clarifications. She just wanted to put me in my place. But the silence sat there and sat there. So I babbled on. "I probably smell more like sheep than goats." One of the other princes snickered. "Wolfgar?" I speculated. "The foreign educated one?" Since he wore a goatee, not a wispy end of the chin Colonel Sanders look, but a sexy one, while all the other men I'd seen so far were clean-shaven. He was looking at me with undisguised contempt. The third prince, the youngest, who would have been Kenric, fidgeted using his hand to cover a smile. He was sitting sideways on the arm of the empty throne, which might indicate he was trying to insinuate himself into the kingship. When he saw me looking at him, he flashed his smile openly, which could have meant that he was friendly, or that he was amused, or that he realized I was too dumb to be serious trouble. "I think," the queen said, "we should kill her now and be done with her." "All right," Abbas said agreeably. One of those straps crisscrossing his chest must have been a harness to hold his sword on his back, for he reached over his shoulder and whipped out a blade almost as long as I was tall. "Wait a minute!" I scrambled backward. Lucky for me, I had outgrown my stinky and patched gown, so that the edge of the dress came only halfway down past my knees. Although this clearly showed my bare and dirty feet, at least I didn't trip as I took a couple hasty steps backward. "Wait a minute," I repeated, as a grinning Ava stepped toward me. I had a skinny knife on my belt, all of about 4 inches long. Ava's sword was broader than that. All things considered, it was probably best not to even go for it. "Just don't move," Abbas told me in his calm, slow voice. "It'll be faster and you won't bleed as much." Was he concerned about hurting me or about messing the inlaid marble floor? "But," I said, dodging him, "but you can't kill her," my brother Kenric pointed out. "She's already been seen by too many people. If you wanted to kill her, you should have done so before." "Well, gee, thanks, I think." Abbas glanced at his mother for confirmation. "I suppose," she conceded, clearly disappointed. And only then did he lower his sword. Wolfgar spoke for the first time. "How about if we all start over again?" He smiled at me in a way that was definitely not friendly, nor amused, nor even, I suspected, "you're too dumb to count." "You come in, you're introduced, we ascertain exactly what it is that you smell of. Let's start there." "No," I said, beginning to be ticked off at all this. "How about if we go back to the introduction phase and you introduce yourselves to me? Sort of as subjects to your new king kind of thing." The prince's smile momentarily froze. But then he said, "Certainly. I am Prince Wolfgar, the firstborn. By common tradition, the heir apparent. This bulwark of humanity," he indicated Mr. Olympia, "is Abbas, the second-born. And this is Kenrick, the youngest. Abbas let that sit for a couple seconds. Excluding yourself, of course. His hand swept in the direction of the queen, who looked miffed to be introduced after the others. Our mother, that is, the mother of the king's legitimate children, Queen Adriana. The queen sat forward in her throne. Now, she said, Janine. Her tone indicated that she thought of that name. Before I could learn what she was about to say, the room went black, as though someone had turned the lights off. Except, of course, that medieval castles don't have light switches. And except that we were in a room with about 20 floor-to-ceiling windows, not even counting the big leaded glass one behind the thrones, though which a moment ago the mid-morning sun had been streaming. What? I started, but was drowned out by a crash of thunder that seemed to go off about half an inch from my ear. Simultaneously, jagged lightning streaked past the window behind the royal group. Usually Rasmussen is more subtle with its special effects. I could feel my scalp get all tingly from the electricity, which I thought was a great detail, but the storm didn't look right. They should have darkened the sky more gradually, and as I glanced around the room, I saw that there were identical bolts of lightning in each of the windows. There was pretty shoddy, like cheaply made anime, where they use the same background in multiple scenes, hoping you won't notice what's going on behind the main characters. Still, I couldn't help but jump. The thunder continued to boom and crackle as though the lightning bolts were striking at the parapets of the castle itself. Princess Janine! The queen sounded impatient, and I realized she had repeated my name several times already. I'm sorry. I raised my voice over the thunder. I didn't hear. I tapped my ear just in case she couldn't hear me. In the flickering light of the near continuous lightning, I saw her look at her sons. They were all watching me warily. Maybe they were worried about how they'd been treating me. Maybe they'd realized they shouldn't have been so open in their hostility. The queen said something I couldn't hear. What? I said. I can't hear you over the thunder. Again, the royals exchanged a look among themselves. The queen raised her eyebrows. Kenrick, sitting on the arm of the throne, stopped swinging his leg and leaned forward. Wolfgar took a step away from me as though nervous, and Abba, still holding his sword, raised it defensively. And no, I decided as the queen said, What are you talking about? No, that wasn't a this is someone we shouldn't have threatened look. That was a maybe this is someone who's totally out of her mind look. At which point the lightning moved inside the castle, and not a one of them twitched. I took a step backward as a jag of lightning lit up the area between the back wall and the royal family. Move! I screamed at them. Obviously the storm was not natural, but that didn't mean it couldn't fry us all. It's getting closer. The next one will hit you. Weren't the little hairs on their arms all standing up and marching around from the charged air? Sure, they wouldn't know the word ozone, but couldn't they smell it? Wolfgar tapped his head in a loose screw gesture, and the queen rested her face in her hand as though I was a bigger burden than she'd ever anticipated. Abbas was obviously waiting for his mother to tell him what to do. Kenrick stood and took a hesitant step toward me, the only one to trust my warning even that far. And then the light came back. No lightning, no vestigial rumbles of dying thunder. The sky was blue and bright outside the window. Oh, I said. Never mind, it went away. Magic, obviously, but whose and why? Deming had said Kenrick dabbled in magic, but why would he call up a storm only I could sense? If it was to make a fool of me, then why was he the one person who heed my warnings and step away from the window? And judging from his face, he was thinking that I was the one who had set out to make him look foolish in front of his family. There was a storm, I said, in here in the room, with thunder and lightning, and my skin all goosebumpy from the electricity. I never knew you were so gullible, Kenrick. Wolfgar smirked. I'll have to remember that. That was sure to endear me to Kenrick. "Enough of this nonsense," the queen said. "Janine, I don't know what you think you're doing, but stop it, or I may yet change my mind about having you killed. For the time being, my husband, in the derangement of his dying, named you his successor. Let's see how long you can keep the job. And your head. Come, Abbas." She swept out of the hall with a rustle of her stiff skirts, which nearly toppled me as she brushed past. Hercules Jr. followed, putting his sword back into its harness, with a glance at my neck as though evaluating for future reference how hard he'd have to swing for a decapitation. Kenrick glowered as he passed, and Wolfgar grinned before he followed, which didn't look quite as friendly as his brother's glower. Ouch! Not a very good first impression on my family. And what was that awful smell? Oh yeah, that was me. Chapter 4. A Heavenly Visitor. The point of heir apparent is to make good decisions, choose capable and trustworthy friends and advisors, and survive long enough to be crowned as king 2 days from now, game time. Judging from what I'd seen of my family, none of them would fit very snugly into the trustworthy friends and advisors category. Maybe my first decision should be to have the guards throw all 4 of them into the dungeon. But seeing as the only other people I'd met here at the castle, not counting stable boys, doorkeepers, and trumpeters, were Deming and Rawdon, it didn't seem a good plan to throw 4/6 of the people I know into prison. I had to find an ally, and fast. As I ran after my family like a puppy that doesn't want to get left behind, I considered. The queen had every reason to hate me, as her husband's illegitimate child. Also, she had the welfare of her 3 offspring to advance if she could not gain the throne for herself. Abbas seemed to be the queen's favorite, after herself, of course, but he obviously wasn't going to make any move that his mother hadn't previously approved. That left Wolfgar and Kenrick, both clearly troublemakers. I based my decision on something totally frivolous. Kenrick was dressed all in black. That might have been a heavy-handed hint on Rasmussen's part that he was the villain, or it might have meant that with his dark hair and light eyes, he knew he looked good in black. On the other hand, it might mean that he was in mourning. If so, he was the only one. I didn't know anything about King Cynric, whether he'd been a just king or a loving husband or a kind father. But so far, nobody had said a word about the poor guy being dead, except in how it related to the succession to the throne. "Kenrick!" I called. I don't know what I'd have done if he'd ignored me, but he waited for me to catch up, and as the others moved on without us. Still, he didn't look happy. He had no reason to trust me, and more than I trusted him. We were standing by one of the gates leading outside with sunlight and chirping of birds and a soft breeze that carried the scent of lavender, as though nature wanted to rub in the idea that I'd imagined or made up the storm. "Are there wizards that live nearby?" I asked. From his expression, it was a dumb question. From his expression, everybody knew. Kenrick crossed his arms over his chest. "Xenos and Oldemar." "Well," I said, "apparently one of them magically created a storm that I and only I could see." "Uh-huh," he said. "Why?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe to make me look like a crazy person?" "Uh-huh," Kenrick said again. "That you did." But he looked more amused than angry now, which I suppose was a step in the right direction. Before I could ask if he could think of any reason one of the wizards might have called up the storm, there was a commotion in the courtyard. 2 guards in chainmail were dragging along a boy who couldn't have been any older than 9 or 10. The boy was crying and trying to squirm away, and the guards were not being gentle about holding firm. "Prince Kenrick," one of the men called out, and, Princess Justine." "Janine," I corrected. The man shrugged, like, "What's the big deal? Didn't I get it mostly right?" He was looking at Kenrick as the person in charge, not me, and no doubt considered himself extremely gracious for even acknowledging me. "We caught this boy poaching. He killed a deer. The usual punishment?" Kenrick opened his mouth to answer, then turned to me. I don't know. Janine? His voice and manner dripped with innocence. What do you think? The usual? One thing I was certain of, he wasn't asking for advice. He was testing. What's the usual? I asked, ignoring the answer the Rasmussen program was prodding forward from my subconscious. First-time offense for poaching small game might be branding, or to have his hand cut off, Kenrick told me. For deer, it's the death penalty. No, the boy whimpered. I didn't do nothing. I found him dead already. I was dressing him down so's their meat wouldn't go to waste, but I didn't kill him. Kenrick was watching me appraisingly. I said, The boy says he didn't do it. Of course he does, Kenrick said. I looked at the boy, all ragged clothes and tear-streaked, with his bones showing under his dirty skin. Did you see him kill the deer? I asked the guards. No, said the one who was doing all the talking. But look at his hands. They were bloody to the elbows. He already admitted to dressing down the carcass, I said. Did you see him kill the deer? For an awful moment, I thought one of them was going to say yes, but then both guards shook their heads. Then let the boy go. My first command as the would-be king. The guards looked to Kendrick, unwilling to take my word for it. Kenrick spread his hands out, indicating it was my decision. The guards let go of the boy and saluted smartly. Perhaps too smartly. Like when you jump out of your seat and shout, Good morning, sir! To the teacher you hate the most. I didn't know what to do next, so for a moment I did nothing. Kenrick turned and walked away, back into the castle. I suspected I was probably supposed to say or do something to make him stay, but the game's time limit for me trying to figure what that should be must have run out. The guards, too, left to do whatever guards here did, when they weren't terrorizing 9-year-old boys. Probably another missing opportunity. Are you all right? I asked the kid. He was watching me through the fringe of hair that hung down in his eyes, looking like a headlight-startled rabbit. He was so dirty, I couldn't tell if the guards had beaten him. Are you all right? I repeated, tipping his face up by the chin. He kicked me hard on the shin and ran off. Ungrateful wretch, I muttered as he ran over the open drawbridge, vaulted over a short fence, and took off through the meadow beyond. I turned to go back into the castle, when suddenly there was a brilliant shaft of light from the sky. Clouds billowed up out of nowhere, then rolled back. Harp music sounded. An angelic choir sang a note of infinitely sad sweetness, and a white-robed figure descended on a golden beam. Giannini Belisario, the white-robed figure said in a voice like the voice of God from the videos they showed in religion class. Outside of the fact that I was too stunned to speak, he was calling me by the wrong name here. Here I was Janine de Saint Jehan. And this sure didn't sound like any Rasmussen program I'd ever heard of. Gianni Belisario, the white-robed figure repeated. The closer he got, the more I could see he wasn't God after all, which was a relief no matter how you look at it. For one thing, his white robe turned out to be a lab coat, and for another, he was wearing glasses. I felt fairly certain God wouldn't go around wearing glasses. The figure came to rest with his Reebok feet about 6 inches from the ground, so that even though he couldn't be much taller than me, I had to tip my head back to look him in the face. Giannini, he said, this is Nigel Rasmussen. Don't panic. I'd been surprised and confused, but doing fine until he said that. There has been a slight emergency. Nothing to worry about. I began to hyperventilate. People from the Society to Prevent Cruelty to Children. What? Somebody I couldn't see or hear must have corrected Mr. Rasmussen. He waved the interruption away, which was good. He was already speaking infuriatingly slow, like someone who doesn't trust the mental capacity of his audience. What do you mean, emergency? I started, but he talked over my question. People from the Society to Protect Our Children, he said, still getting it wrong, have broken into the building. They have damaged our equipment. Don't worry, there is no physical danger to your body. The intruders have been removed by the police. What do you mean, no physical? But again, he kept on talking. He can't hear me, I realized. He probably couldn't see me. I shut and listened since I wouldn't be able to ask him to repeat. We are working to regain control, Mr. Rasmussen was saying, which wasn't comforting at all, especially from someone who had ink stains on his lab coat where he'd forgotten to use his pocket protector. There are fail-safe measures to keep external stimuli like power failures or surges from affecting your mental state. But while these safeguards are in effect, you will find it difficult to exit the heir apparent program. I was stuck here? The only route, Mr. Rasmussen said, is to successfully complete the game. Unsuccessful solutions will loop you back to the start of the program. I can do that, I thought. What he was telling me was that I was getting free extra tries. I began to breathe normally. Unfortunately, Mr. Rasmussen said, and my breath caught again, this is the last time we will be able to communicate with you. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you the solution to the game since there is no one single right path. There are an infinite number of permutations, depending on which characters you take into your confidence, how you react to the problems with which you will be presented, and what policies you set for your government. Mr. Rasmussen might have been counting on this going over my head, but I could figure it out. If there were an infinite number of possible right ways that could get me out of here, there had to be an infinite number of wrong ways that would set me back on that hill in St. Jehan. Don't panic, Mr. Rasmussen said again. The readouts on my heart rate and blood pressure must have been going wild. All you have to do is play the game as well and as quickly as you can. And while that was still sinking in, while I was mentally repeating, quickly? Mr. Rasmussen said, wait, wait. That seemed all I could do, but he wasn't talking to me. He was beginning to float upward again. The heavenly choir started humming. The clouds took on a pink hue. Mr. Rasmussen was again talking to someone else, arguing, no, this is foolish. She needs to know the urgency. He turned back to me, speaking in a rush now, so that I suddenly suspected his earlier comments had been scripted. What I said before isn't entirely accurate. I don't want to frighten you. You should be fine. But there's no time to waste. The prolonged direct stimulation to your brain is dangerous. The longest game we have is supposed to be over in an hour, and your equipment would normally be safe up for up to 5 minutes that exposure. But with the damage these people have inflicted, your safety zone is much, much less. We don't know how long you have, but the longer you're in the game, the more you risk fatal overload. Overload? What was he saying? And fatal overload? Now it was my turn to cry. Wait! To him. But even if he could have heard me, it was obvious that there was nothing he could do about remaining. Advice, Mr. Rasmussen called down at me as the clouds foamed about him. Kenrick and Sister Mary Ursula don't work well together. Who in the world was Sister Mary Ursula? Mr. Rasmussen's voice was fading, and despite the fact that he was obviously shouting, and next time, don't forget the ring. What ring? I shouted back up to him. All I could see far above were the bottoms of his sneakers, and whatever you do, don't. But naturally, I couldn't make that out. And then there's an email in here. That's the end of the chapter, but here's an email. It says, subject, urgent emergency situation. Date, May 25th, 3:27 p.m., U.S. Eastern Daylight Time. From Nigel Rasmussen. To Department Heads Distribution List. Background. The Rochester, New York facility has been compromised by unauthorized persons who have forced entry and damaged equipment while it was in use. See attached file for damage assessment and equipment specifics. The intruder have been removed and arrested by local authorities. Security believes them to be politically motivated local individuals working spontaneously in an isolated incident rather than organized terrorists, but tightened security in all gaming centers nonetheless. See attached file for background on CPOP political lobby group. At the time of the raid on the facility, 2 gamers were in the VR arcade and were not harmed. One group of 4 TI gamers had just gone under and were successfully retrieved by the premises technologists, but a lone player was already fully in total immersion, and the technologists believed serious bodily harm would result from disconnecting this gamer before successful completion of the game. Access code number 703592B3 to monitor subject's vital signs. Note: gamer is a 14-year-old minor believed to have been limited gaming experience. Using the residual power in the grids, contact was made with the gamer to apprise her of the situation. Though, on the advice of Lisa in psychology, the risk was downplayed so as not to cause non-functional anxiety. Once that power drained, contact was obstructed and cannot be re-established. Current situation. We do not know exactly how much time we have, and we need all possible input from all available technologists with all possible speed. We require estimates, advice for repairing the equipment in minimal time, contingency plans to disconnect the gamer in case of system failure before game completion. Legal is working to make sure we are covered, but I do not want RE to be the first VR company with a fatality. And that's where we're going to stop today, boys and girls. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.